to my first ever YouTube video. Today's video is going to be a tutorial showing you how to paint and decoupage a mason jar. Now, if you've never heard of decoupage as a craft, really all it means is just cutting out paper and sticking it onto something else. Commonly we'll use napkins, but you can use any kind of paper really. So just to get started, I'm going to talk you through all the bits that you will need, and then I'm going to get stuck into showing you how to actually get on and do. So first off, you need a mason jar. I've picked this one up from Home Bargain. It was around about £1, so not particularly expensive. You can get more expensive ones, so you can get the Kilner brand or you can get the Ball brand, but you don't need to. These are really easily available. They come in two different sizes. So this is the 500ml size, and this one here is the 1 litre size, so you can see the difference. We're just going to use this one. They come with a lid that has two parts. So if I show you there, we're going to just discard that for the time being. The other things that you will need if you're going to give this a go are decoupage glue. This particular one is available in the range. It's not expensive, again, it's a few quid, but you can use PVA glue if you want to. We're also going to use some chalk paint. So I generally tend to use this Rust-Oleum chalk paint. I find it's quite dense in colour and it's really good. You could use emulsion if that's all that you've got hanging around. I think you could probably try acrylic paint as well, but I've never used it, so I'm not going to recommend whether that's any good or not. You need a sponge of some kind for putting your paint on. Don't use a brush because you don't really want the brush strokes coming up on your jar. If you haven't got any of these particular sponges, these again are from the range, Artist sponges. You can use just a normal kitchen sponge. If you just cut a bit of that off, that's absolutely fine. You need some kind of brush to put your glue on with, and you will also need a napkin. So this particular one is a Rendale one, and I like it because I like the stag design, but any really. What I would say though, if you're starting out, is try and get one that's got a white background, because that's a lot easier when you're putting an image onto a white painted jar. When it dries, you won't see the edges. Whereas if you use something coloured, you might see the edges quite a lot and you might not like that finish. So just something to bear in mind. So I think that's everything. I'm going to get on and show you how we do. Okay. So the first thing that you need to do is to clean your jar. So hot soapy water, absolutely fine. I also sometimes use rubbing alcohol. So if you happen to have any of that lying around, you can use that and that's absolutely fine. If not, don't worry, just soapy water is absolutely fine. And then dry it off properly afterwards so you've got a clean, dry surface to begin with. So the next thing that we're going to do is paint. So I tend to hold my jars like this because it's a bit easier to work with them, and you need to have them upside down at some point so you can paint the bottom. So I find it easier just to hold it on my wrist like that. Obviously don't get it stuck. And I tend to just pop my paint into a little takeaway carton, and that way it's a bit easier for the sponge to get at it. It's also quite good if you've got little ones because the paint's contained. So here we go. So you want to just pop a bit of paint onto your sponge. Don't put too much on because you don't want really, really thick layers. A couple of thinner layers is always better with paint. And then you just start to dab it on. So if I show you like this, what I try and do though is stop here at the thread. So I like to put the lid back on the jar when I've finished with it. Now if you paint right the way up to the threads, then the lid becomes much harder to twist on and off. And also when you take the lid off, it kind of scratches some of the paint away, so it starts to look a bit messy after a while. So I tend to just paint up to the, this thread here. So you basically just want to pop the paint on, use a dabbing motion to dab it on, and like I say, not too much because you don't want to have really thick gloopy sections, and it will take forever to dry if you put too much paint on. So you go all the way around. And again, just keep it on your hand like this so that it's easier to manoeuvre it round. Right the way across the front. And then you're ready to lay it down. So all I do then is just hold the bottom of it, hold the tip there and pop it down like that. And then paint the base. So that's the first coat done, really, really easy. Just let that dry. It'll probably take about half an hour, something like that, depending on how warm it is. So you can just leave that to one side. And then you're ready to put your next coat on. So I've got one that I've already painted.
And then for your second coat, it's just exactly the same again. Not too much paint on your sponge, and then just use a dabbing motion to paint the second coat on. Now, don't worry if the paint goes slightly onto the threads or goes onto part of the glass that you don't really want it to, because you can always just wipe that off with a damp cloth and it's absolutely fine. So just like we did with the first coat, dabbing the paint on all the way around until you've completely covered the jar. And we're nearly finished. And then when it's time for you to paint the very base of the jar again, we'll just do exactly the same as we did last time and pop it upside down on its neck. Just like that, and then second coat on the very bottom.
And that's that. Leave that one to dry, and then we're ready to put our decoupage image on. So while that's drying, I'm going to just cut out my shape and show you how we do that. So a standard napkin is about 33 centimetres each way, and it comes in 4 quarters like this. So if you were making more than one jar, so say if you're making for presents, you can get 4 out of 1 napkin. This one's got 2 different styles of stag on. So you can see here I've done the smaller one that stands up. So for this video I'm going to do the stag's head. So the first thing to do is just cut that quarter out that you need. We'll just get rid of that. So now you've just got 1 quarter like this. The next thing you need to do is to cut out the image, and you don't need to go right the way to the edge. If you just cut as close as you can to the edge, round, that's absolutely fine. What you'll find when we glue on to the jar is that the white of the background will disappear into the white of the jar. So that's kind of an easy way to start out. So we'll cut out our image. And this one, it looks lovely on a jar, it really does. It's a really, really nice image. So again, you don't need to be incredibly precise with this. It's not essential that you get right the way onto the outline of the image. Okay. So just very carefully cutting round. And this is really good for kids to do because, like I say, they don't need to be incredibly precise. You just need to get there or thereabouts. And I would say if it is something that you're looking at doing with kids, then probably about age 8 or so plus is good for this. Any younger, depending on the image, probably okay, but probably about 8 or so, they've got enough dexterity to do this. So there's our little image cut out. Step 1 done. The next thing to do is to separate the layers. So if you've ever noticed on a napkin, they come in usually about 3 different layers. And actually for decoupage, all we need is that very, very top layer, so it becomes very translucent when you take it away. The image is only ever on the top layer of a napkin. The other layers are just plain white, so you can discard those. So the easiest way to separate the layers, if it doesn't start to come apart already, is just to wet your finger and thumb and dab at it. So just like that. I would dab at it until some of the layers separate, and then very carefully pull them apart. So that's taken one layer off, and we need to get the other one. So the same again, just dab in very carefully, and then you'll see that the layers separate. And again, carefully, so that you don't tear. Pull it apart. And then what you're left with is the top layer, which is the image. But as you can see, it's gone much, much more translucent. And this is what I mean by you won't notice those white outlines when you decoupage it and stick it onto the jar, because they just disappear into the paint. Okay, so next thing we need to do is put the image on. So we've already cut out our little stag before. Pop your jar just down like this, and then figure out kind of where you want to put your stag. So he just about fits on these. And once you've figured roughly where you want it, take it off, get your decoupage glue. Show you that there. Okay. And then you just want to put quite a thin coat over the parts of the jar where you want your image to stick. Now, at this point, it doesn't need to be a thick coat or anything massively precise. You just want a little bit of paint. Oh, sorry, a little bit of glue even on the area where you're going to put your image. And the reason for that is because it will just help you stick it down where it needs to be before you actually start to put the glue on top. So leave it on for a couple of seconds and just start to feel it. It will go off fairly quickly. It will go quite tacky. When it does, pop your image back on, and you should find that you can still move it about a little bit if you need to without the paper tearing. So the trick is not to have too much glue on, just enough. There you go, so that you can move it around and stick it down when you're happy with it. And then what you should have is that. Okay. And then what we do now is we get our glue again. Not too much, round about that much is enough. And then just working from the centre out, brush the glue very gently over the image. So the important thing is not to put too much glue on, because you will tear the paper and you don't want to do that. Okay. But you're just working all those edges round so that they're all stuck. And as you can see, as you start to glue it down, you sort of lose the edges a little bit. So you see here, they're not quite as noticeable as they were. And they'll dry away altogether as the glue dries. And just at your edges, just be really careful there, because sometimes that tears a little bit more easily. And then you're done. Go around and check if there's any bits that are wrinkled. And if there are, then you can just press like that to get rid of them. Don't press too hard though, because again, you could tear the paper, and a lot of them will kind of disappear as the jar dries. So a bit like when you put wallpaper up, really, you often find that some of the tiny little creases just sort of disappear, and that'll happen as well. So there you go. Have a look, check you're happy with it. And when you are, don't fiddle about with it too much, just leave him to dry. Pop him upside down like that, and probably again it'll take about half an hour to dry, and I'll show you what that looks like shortly when he's dried off. So the last thing that you need to do is to varnish it, and the reason you do that is just to protect the image. What I use is this Ronseal diamond finish, and I use the matte version of that rather than the satin or the silk glossy version. So all you do, same as with the paint really, not too much on the brush, and you're just painting all round, including over the image that we've just decoupaged. Probably want 2 coats of this, but if you're going to use it as a vase, then I would say put 3 coats on, and that just means it's extra protected, so that if it does get water on it, it won't damage the jar at all. Probably takes about 20 minutes or so to dry between coats. Sufficient for you to do your second and third ones. Best if you leave it a little bit longer, but if you're doing it with kids and they're not particularly patient, 20 minutes, half an hour or so should be absolutely fine. To do the bottom, it's just same again, just pop it on its neck and then just paint over the bottom, and that just means that when you're storing it right way up, the bottom doesn't become chipped and worn. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you have, if you could give it a little thumbs up, that'd be absolutely awesome. And if you want to see any more tutorials on how to do decoupage, if you want to subscribe to my channel, I'll be posting some more videos soon. And if you want to hear a notification when I post any of the videos, if you want to hit the notification bell as well, that would be great. All right, thanks a lot, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
And here's the finished article. So as you can see, the edges have all dried really nicely into the jar and you can't see them. And I've just popped a bit of jute string around the lid to make him look pretty. So I hope yours looks like this too.